Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are kicking off with a new brand mini series in After Effects. In each video we learn a different Apple style animation, separate techniques that stand on their own, but by the end of the series we'll combine them all into one polished short. This is part 1, we will focus on building a clean eye-catching animation from scratch. In the next 2 parts we will keep adding more animations until we have a completed viral ready short made entirely out of the animation we've built together. All the project files and assets are linked down below, so grab them and let's jump straight into the animation. Let's start by creating a new composition with a width of 1080 and a height of 9020. The comp length should be 30 seconds. Then we will add the short I made from Jack Nail's podcast with Belena Anderson. That is the layer we'll use to create the animations on. I added this shot in the description. And of course, I want to give a huge credit for Jack Nail for his truly outstanding podcast. Create a new white solid and add the 4-color gradient effect. Change color 1 to white, color 2 also to white, color 3 to a very light pink, and color 4 to a light pink purple. Next, create a black rectangle at the top of the screen like this and center its anchor point. Inside the rectangle settings, increase the roundness to 90. Using the shape tool again, draw a very thin white rectangle. It should be like a line, slightly longer than the black rectangle, and center its anchor point. In each settings, click Add, then choose Repeater. In the Repeater settings, increase the copies to 6, turn the layer into 3D, set the X rotation to 60 and scale it up to 200%. In the position settings, move it slightly left and down so it's centered inside the black rectangle. Go back to the line settings, click on rectangle path and extend the end of the line forward. Also shrink the line slightly. Then use scale to bring it back to its original size. Connect the trackmate of the lines to the rectangle and bring back the visibility. It's still a bit small, so scale it up a little more and move it down so the bottom of the lines reach above the 3/4 of the black rectangle high. Add the gradient ramp effect, place the start ramp at the top of the lines and the end ramp at the bottom. Duplicate the lines layer. In the duplicate, remove the repeater so there is only one line. Move it to the center between the lines, center the anchor point and scale it up so it's twice as thick. Finally, reduce the opacity of both the duplicate and original lines layer to 50%. Duplicate the top line again and set its opacity back to 100%. Change the end gradient color to blue, add the glow effect, lower the threshold to 55% and increase the radius significantly. Lower the threshold to about 20%. Right click on the layer, under layer styles choose inner shadow. In the settings, increase the size to 20 and reduce the opacity to 50%. Remove the trackmate from the layer, pre-compose it, then apply the trackmate to the pre-comp with the rectangle as before. Drag the navigation icon into the comp. In rotation, set it to -90 degrees so it's aligned with the strips. Scale down to 35% and place it at the start of the blue line. Add a tint effect and change the map black to white. Right click and add inner shadow to the layer. In the settings, increase the size to 28 and lower the opacity to 30%. Add a linear wipe effect to the comp. Set the angle to 0 degrees and increase the transition compilation so the line starts just before the navigation icon. At frame 7, create a scale keyframe for the rectangle, move to the start of the layer, set it to 0 degrees and then add the bounce. I'm using the bounce plugin, which is completely free and also linked in the video description. To work with it, select the keyframes, make sure it's set to scale and click bounce it. Move a few frames forward and create a scale keyframes for the navigation icon. Scale down to 0%, go 6 frames forward and set it back to 35%. Select the scale keyframes and add the bounce. Now, create the position keyframes above the first scale keyframe. Go back to the first keyframe and move the icon downward. Add the bounce to the position and make sure it's set to position in the bounce settings. Above the last keyframes, create a further keyframes for the blue line comp. Go back to the first keyframe and set the further to 280. At 1 second, create a scale and position keyframes for the icon. Use parent and link to connect the comp to the line below it. Now, for the 2 line layers, create scale and position keyframes. Move to 3.5 seconds. Move the arrow icon forward to the edge of the line. Move both line layers upward and slightly increase the scale, creating a zoom in movement. Return to the first keyframes of the lines and create a transition compilation keyframes for the comp. Go back to the last keyframes and increase the transition compilation so the line stays in front of the icon. Back to the first keyframes of the lines. For the bottom line layer, create a start and end ramp keyframes, and for the top line layer, also create a start and end ramp keyframes. At the last keyframes, place the start ramp at the top part of the square. Finally, select all keyframes for 1 second to 3.5 seconds, open the graph editor, stretch the curves, and create a fast ease in motion. The arrow icon looks a bit too big, so go to the last keyframe of the arrow icon and reduce the scale to 20%, then move it upward. For the comp, increase the linear wipe so that it stays in front of the icon. Next, add the grid and ramp effect to the icon. Place the start ramp above the icon and the end ramp at the bottom of the rectangle. Create start and end ramp keyframes, then move them to the 1 second keyframes, and position the ramp points in the same spots as before. Go into the graph editor for the ramp keyframes and stretch the curves to create a fast entrance. Add a CC light burst effect to the arrow icon, set the center point above the arrow, create a ray length keyframe and lower it to 0. Move to the last keyframes and increase it to 70. Open the graph editor for the ray length and stretch the curves to create a fast entrance. Now add a second arrow, go back to the first arrow, copy the tint effect and paste it to the new arrow. The arrow is facing the wrong way, so right click and under transform choose flip horizontal. Move the arrow to the top left corner of the rectangle and scale down to 45%. Add a text layer and type 600 meter in bold font. I'm using the no need to sans font throughout this video and I will add it to the project files. Click on the contrast property and stretch the text vertically to 140%. Restore the contrast property and increase it slightly. Center the anchor point and move the text next to the arrow. Duplicate the text layer and type Women's Respect. Move the new text below the previous text and scale it down. Double click the text, change the text type to medium and lower the opacity to 50%. Use the shape tool to create a small white circle next to the text. Duplicate the shape layer. For the top layer, click Fill and choose Red. Move the white circle down so the edges of the circles touch each other. Duplicate the first text layer, bring it to the front and change the text to 55. Center the anchor point and move it above the red circle. Scale it down and center it in the middle of the circle. Duplicate the text layer again and change it to 65. Move the text above the white circle and change the text color to black. Now arrange the elements to fit better on the screen. Move the arrow slightly to the left, increase the size of the 600 meter text and slightly enlarge the Women's Respect text. Using the parent and link, connect each number to the circle behind it, 65 to the white circle and the 55 to the red circle. This way, when we scale the circles, the text will scale with them. Increase the scale to 170%, move them slightly to the right, move the red circle slightly up and the white circle slightly down. At 12 frames from the start, create scale and rotation keyframes for the long bar. Create scale and position keyframes for the first text. Also create a scale and position keyframes for the Women's Respect text. Create scale and rotation keyframes for both circles. Move back 5 frames, select both circles and rotate them 60 degrees and scale them down to 0%. Move the Women's Respect text down, the 600 meter text up, select both and scale them down to 0%. Move the long bar anchor point to the bottom, rotate it minus 70 degrees and scale it to 0%. Select all scale keyframes and add bounce. Select all the rotation keyframes, make sure they're set to rotation and add the bounce. Finally, select all position keyframes and add bounce as well. Go back to the last keyframes, select all layers from the arrow to the number 65 and create opacity keyframes for all of them. Go back to the first keyframes and set the opacity to 0%. Click on sequence to create one frame offset between the layers for uneven entry. I'm using the motion tool plugin, which is free and also linked in the video description. Add a message image, which will serve as a template for the next part. Add a linear color key effect and sample the color from the image background to remove it. Move the message below the rectangle. Basically, this message is just used as a template, but if you want, you can use it as the message. In a moment, you will see why I prefer creating one instead of using it. Using the shape tool, create a rectangle with the size of the message. In the rectangle settings, increase the roundness to 60. Right click on the rectangle path and choose Convert to Bezier Path. Using the pen tool, create a point at the bottom right corner of the rectangle. Move the point to the edge of the template, then pull the right side back and align it with the template. Stretch the left side backward as well, add a point in the middle and adjust all the edges to match the template. Open position and move it down. Scale it to 60%, the part I mentioned that can only be done in the message we created. Select all the points of the left side of the message and stretch them to the left to enlarge the message. Duplicate the message, move it down to see it, click on path, select all points on the left side of the message and stretch them far to the right to shrink the message. Finally, delete the template. Anyone using it can leave it and duplicate it. Set the scale of both message to 100%. Arrange them between the start of the screen and the top rectangle, leaving a small gap between them. Add a gradient ramp effect to the top message. Place the start ramp at the left edge of the message and the end ramp at the right edge. Change the color of the endpoint of the gradient ramp to blue, and the start point to a light blue. Copy the gradient ramp effect to the second message, position the start point at the beginning of the message, and the endpoint at the other edge as before. After you did it, clip swap colors. Add inner shadow to the large message layer. In the settings, increase the size to 50 and reduce the opacity to 20%. Copy the inner shadow and paste it onto the second message layer. Use the text tool and type "What is the fastest way to lose a woman's respect?" Center the anchor point and move the text to the center of the message. Increase the text length to 130% and scale all the text to 80%. Duplicate the text and type "On a first date." Center the anchor point and move the text above the smaller message. Select the large message, use the anchor point tool, and move the anchor point to the edge of the message. And also move the anchor point of the second message to its edge. Lower the text of the first message so it sits above the message. Parent each text to its layer message behind it. Move 7 frames from the start and create scale and rotation keyframe for the first rectangle layer. Go to the start of the layer, set scale to 0% and rotate it to -60 degrees. Add bounce to the scale keyframes, then add bounce to the rotation keyframes. Move to the moment when the message stops bouncing and add the position keyframe. Return to the start of the layer and move the message down. Open the graph editor and create a fast entrance. And it should look like this. Now we will want to split the text into the visual words. Duplicate the text from the first message, copy it and delete all the text except the first word. Duplicate the word "what's", paste the sentence, and move the text to sit exactly above the template. Continue this process for each word in the sentence until you have a layer for each word positioned above the template. Once finished, delete the bottom text that uses a template, select all the word layers, go back to the start of the message appearance, and create scale and position keyframes for all the layers. Move 6 frames back, lower the text, and scale all the words to 50%. Select all position keyframes and add bounce. Select all scale keyframes and add bounce as well. Create opacity keyframes, lower them to 0%, then go to the last keyframes and set back to 100%. Finally, center the anchor point for all the letters and create a staggered entrance with a 6 frame offset. This should look like this. Copy the scale and rotation keyframes from the large message to the small one. Finally, start with the scale, add bounce to the keyframes. Duplicate the text from the small message, copy it and delete all the sentence except the first word. Create a separate layer for each word, just like in the previous sentence. When you're done, delete the first sentence that uses a template, select all the words and center their anchor points. Move to the last keyframes of the first word from the previous sentence, create position, scale and opacity keyframes, move 6 frames back, move the words down, scale them to 50% and lower the opacity to 0%. Start with the scale keyframes and add the bounce. Then do the same for the position keyframes. As in the previous text, create a 6 frame offset between each word to create a staggered entrance. Select all the layers of the small message, move them so they start slightly after the first message, and because there isn't enough time, reduce the word offset to 3 frames. When the message appears, we want to add the small circles that burst behind it. Using the shape tool, create a white circle and center the anchor point. Add the gradient ramp effect, set the start ramp in the middle of the circle and the end ramp at the left corner. Change the ramp shape to radial ramp, set the end color a strong green, change the shape layer mode to screen. Finally, add the glow effect and increase the glow radius to 176. Move to the moment where the first message appears, create a scale keyframe, go to the beginning of the layer and scale it down to 0%. In the graph editor, create a sharp ease in. Just before the last keyframe, create an opacity keyframe. At the last keyframe, lower the opacity to 0%. Finally, parent the circle to the long message, duplicate the circle and place it in the beginning of the small message layer. At the last keyframe, scale and move the circle so it perfectly covers the small message. Move both circles layer large and small to the bottom, just above the background. Duplicate the large message. In the duplicate, change the start ramp color to pink and the end color to yellow. Add the glow effect. Set the threshold to 0% and increase the radius significantly. At the last scale keyframe, create an opacity keyframe, move forward 10 frames and lower the value to 0%. Copy the gradient ramp and the glow effects. Duplicate the small message and paste the effect into it. And finally, delete the first gradient ramp effect. At the last keyframes, create an opacity keyframe, move forward 10 frames and lower it to 0%. This adds extra color to the entrance of the message. Using the text tool, type question mark in purple color and place it above the message. Enable construct properties and increase the Y scale to 130%. Bring back the construct properties and increase both scales slightly. Finally, center the anchor point. Right click on the layer. Under layer styles, choose inner shadow. In the settings, increase the size to 12, reduce the opacity to 30%, add the glow effect, set the threshold to 0% and increase the radius slightly. Go 1.5 seconds from the start, move it up slightly and create a position keyframe. Go back to the start of the layer and move it down. In the graph editor, create a sharp ease in. Move forward 6 frames and create a scale keyframe. At the start of the layer, scale it down to 0% and finally add bounce to the scale. You can shift the last scale keyframe slightly forward for timing. Duplicate the question mark, use the anchor point to reposition it elsewhere and change its color to yellow. Duplicate it again, move it to the left using the anchor point and change the color to fuchsian pink. Continue duplicating, changing the color each time and position them around the message. Select all the layers and go to the last keyframe. Lower the opacity to 0% and create opacity keyframes. Move slightly backward and restore the opacity to 100%. Select all the position keyframes and center their anchor points. Finally, offset them by 7 frames so they appear randomly instead of all at once. Move all the question mark layer down so they sit above the circle layers. Add glow effect to the red circle and increase the radius. Copy the glow effect to the second circle, both text layers, and finally to the arrow icon. Just before the end of the sentence, select all the layers except the video and the background layers and create an opacity keyframes. Move forward a few frames and set the opacity to 0%. Since the red circle connects to the text animation, go back to the previous keyframes, find the red circle layer and delete its opacity keyframes. Move down to the background layer and create color keyframes. Move forward 4 frames and change all colors to black. Using the shape tool, create a small green square in the middle left of the screen. Center the anchor point. In the shape settings, increase the roughness to 30. Right click on the layer, go to layer styles and choose inner shadow. In the inner shadow settings, increase the size to 80, lower the opacity to 50% and change the color to white. Add the glow effect and increase the radius significantly. Drag the phone icon into the comp, scale it down and position it in the center of the green square. Add a tint effect and set the map black to white. Go to the layer styles and add a drop shadow. In the drop shadow settings, increase the size to 47 and lower the opacity to 50%. Add the underglow effect and set the radius to 370. At second 3, create scale and position keyframes for the red circle. Right click on the position and choose separate dimensions. Move forward half a second, move the circle up and left and slightly increase its scale. Move a bit more than a half second forward, move the circle above the square and scale down to 90%. Open the graph editor for all those keyframes, right click and choose Edit Value Graph. For scale, stretch the first keyframe to the right, the second to the left, the last one left and down for overshoot effect. For Y position, stretch the keyframes just like the scale but inverted. For X position, stretch the second keyframe left and up, the last one right and down, then lift it slightly for smooth motion. If you did everything right, it should look like this. Move to the movement when the circle is almost touched the square, cut the layer and move the second part up. Move back a little, create scale keyframes for the square and the icon on it. For the icon, move the anchor point to the corner and create a rotation keyframe. Go back 4 frames, scale both to 0% and rotate the icon by -90 degrees. Select all the scale keyframes and add bounce. Then do the same for the rotation keyframes. Lower the opacity of both layers to 0% and create an opacity keyframe. Move to the previous keyframes and bring back the opacity to 100%. Turn the phone icon trackmate to the square and restore the visibility. Duplicate the square and add 4 color gradient effect. Place each color point at the middle of the square edges. Move the 4 color gradient above the glow and reduce the glow radius to 85. Duplicate again and place the duplicate layer under the original square. 10 frames after the last opacity keyframes of the top color square, lower opacity to 0%, which creates a colorful entrance for the square. For the top red circle layer, change the glow color to A and B colors, set color A to bright red, and sample color B from color A. Lower the threshold to 0% and the radius to 65. Add text and write 1. Center the anchor point and position the text in the center of the red circle. Scale the text to 80%, create a position keyframe, move back 6 frames, lift it slightly, and then bounce to the position. Move to the last keyframe, parent the text 1 to the red circle, also connect it with the trackmate, and restore the layer visibility. Go back to the beginning of the top circle layer, and shift its keyframes so the last one ends at the start of the comp. For the duplicate bottom square, delete its keyframe and parent it to the original square. For the top duplicate square, delete only the scale keyframes but keep the opacity keyframes, and parent it to the original square as well. This way, they all move accordingly to the original square. Finally, parent the icon and the circle to the original square too. Move 6 frames forward from the last rectangle keyframes, and create a rotation keyframe. Move forward 4 frames and rotate it by -30 degrees. Then, 2 frames later, rotate it back to 0 degrees. Finally, add rotation bounce for a swinging effect as the circle reaches the square. Add the text and write, "Not respect yourself." Increase Y scale to 130%, then scale the entire text by 30%. Position the text next to the square and center the anchor point. As before, separate each letter to its own layer. Duplicate the layer, keep only the first letter on the duplicate layer, duplicate each letter for the rest of the text, and position them according to the template. When you're done, delete the template layer. For all letters, move the anchor point to the bottom left corner. When Balenia says descends, create position, scale, rotation, and opacity keyframes. Move back 6 frames, move letters to the right, scale to 0%, rotate 60 degrees, and set opacity to 0%. Add bounce to the scale, then to the position, and finally to the rotation. Set a 2-frame offset between each letter for a staggered entrance. To create a glowing color entrance, duplicate all letters and move them up. For the first duplicate letter, add a gradient ramp effect, set start point to the beginning of the layer, and the end point at the end of the sentence. Change the start color to pink and end color to yellow-green. Add glow effect and set the radius to 30. Copy the gradient ramp and the glow to all other letters. Move 10 frames after the last keyframe of the first duplicate letter and reduce the opacity to 0%. Copy those opacity keyframes to the next letter, move to the last keyframe, and paste them for all the remaining letters. Offset the opacity keyframes by 2 frames for a smooth fade out. If it's not clear what I did here, write a comment and I will explain it to you. Create a white rectangle at the bottom of the screen, center the anchor point, and increase the roundness until the corners are fully rounded. Duplicate the layer, add motion blur, and parent it to the original using the trackmate. Add a fast box blur effect and increase the radius to 13. Add gradient ramp effect. Set start point at the top left and the end point at the bottom right. Change the start color to dark gray and the end color to yellow brown. Increase the blend with the original to 34%. Move those rectangle layers below the green square layers. At second 5, create a position keyframes for the green square. Also create a roundness keyframe. Move forward 1 second. Drag the green square to the left corner of the rectangle. Increase the roundness until it's become a circle and drag it to the edge. Go back to the previous keyframes. Under fill, create a color keyframe. Move back to the last keyframes and change the color to white. Return to the first keyframes. Create matte black keyframes for the iPhone icon. Move to the last keyframes and change the color to green. Move back to the first keyframes. Since the bottom square with the glowing colors behind the green square stays a square and does not become a circle, go into its settings and create a roundness keyframe. Go to the last keyframe and increase the roundness until it becomes a circle. Go back to the first keyframes and create point color keyframes. Move to the last keyframes and move all points to the edge of the circle as they were previously on the square. Lower the opacity to 40% and create a keyframe. Go back to the first keyframe and raise it to 100%. Select all the last keyframes, enter the graph editor and stretch the graph to the side for a fast exit animation. For all the letter layers, create opacity keyframes. Move forward 4 frames and lower the opacity to 0%. At that point, cut and delete everything after. Just before the circle reaches the bottom square, create opacity keyframes for the text and to the red circle. Go forward to the point where they start touching the square and lower the opacity to 0%. Cut those layers and delete everything after as well. For the background layer, lower the opacity to 0% and create a keyframe. Move back a few frames and raise the opacity to 100%. Move to the point where the circles begins to enter the rectangle. Parent the bottom rectangle, that with the shadow, to the original rectangle above it. create scale and rotation keyframes for it, move backward 5 frames, set the scale to 0% and rotate it by minus 150 degrees. Add bounce to the scale and then to the rotation. Go to the last keyframes, select all the layers that make up the circle, cut them and move the cut layers above the previous ones. From the cut layers, parent the central circle layer, to which all the layers connect to the bottom circle layer. Add the text layer and write 6 cents. Increase the Y scale to 130%. Center the anchor point and move the text to the center of the rectangle. Search for the typewriting effect. Set the first keyframe when the sentence begins and the last keyframe where it ends. Go into the graph editor and ease the keyframes for smooth animation. Go back to the last keyframe and create a position keyframe for the circle. Move forward 5 frames and move the circle to the opposite edge of the rectangle. In the graph editor, raise the keyframes curve to a normal and finally add bounce to the position. Parent all layers of the circle to the rectangle, that with a shadow, using the trackmate. Create a mask for the text. In the mask settings, create a path keyframe, move 1 frame forward and shift the mask to the right so it hits the part of the text beneath the circle. Continue this frame by frame, moving the mask so that the parts under and in front of the circle remain hidden. Go back to the first keyframe. On the main rectangle layer, create start color and end color keyframes. Move slightly forward and change the start color to dark green. Set the end color to the same color as the start color, but in a slightly lighter shade. Return to the first color keyframe of the rectangle. Create rotation keyframes for the iPhone icon. Move forward 4 frames and rotate it by minus 40 degrees. Then move 3 more frames forward and rotate it back to 0 degrees. Go back to the first keyframe and for the iPhone comp, create a black matte keyframe. Also, for the circle layer behind it, create a color keyframe. Move half second back, change the color back to green and reset the iPhone icon's color to white. For the circle layer, add the echo effect. Lower the echo time to minus 0.010, increase the number of echoes to 6, lower the intensity to 85, and the decay to 90. Finally, set the operator to maximum. It should look like this. At second 8, select all the layers except the background and the podcast, create opacity keyframes for all of them, move a few frames back, and lower them to 0%. Finally, cut and delete all the layers at that point.
What's the fastest way to lose a woman's respect on a first date?
Not respect yourself. I always say women have a sixth sense.
That's it for part 1. In the next video, we'll create another Apple style animation and keep building toward our final short. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next parts. See you there.